My name is Evelyn Vance, and I was 34 years old the night my own brother and his wife invited me to dinner to formally ask me to erase my entire existence. They didn't phrase it exactly like that, of course. Toxic people rarely announce their villainy with a megaphone, they usually dress it up as a family favor. They served me a butter-poached lobster tail while Vanessa, my sister-in-law, refilled the crystal wine glasses and said, "We need you to move into the basement and be our full-time nanny. We simply cannot afford daycare." I didn't react immediately, I didn't cry, and I certainly didn't raise my voice. I merely set my leather folder oxblood red, soft at the corners on the edge of the mahogany table and folded my hands over it. I didn't open it, not yet. They genuinely believed that the worst part of that lavish Sunday dinner would be my eventual refusal. They were wrong. The worst part was already sitting right there inside their own arrogant paperwork, and in the decisions they had quietly made about my home, my time, and my future. Stay with me, because that black spreadsheet I brought wasn't the cruelest thing on the table that night. Not even close. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories, where women who are underestimated, overlooked, and used as the family's scapegoat finally get the last quiet word. If a calm voice, a spine of steel, and a cold, hard truth sound like justice to you, then you are exactly where you belong. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Drop a like and be sure to subscribe. The invitation had arrived by a casual text message on a Tuesday afternoon. Sunday dinner, Evie, 6 p.m. sharp. It's important. My older brother Bradley never wrote the words "it's important" unless he needed something. In our family dynamic, he only ever called when he required a financial bailout, and he only texted when he felt a vague, fleeting sense of guilt about how he treated me. I am a numbers person. I have breathed, analyzed, and dismantled balance sheets for 12 years. Most people look at me, a quiet, unassuming 34-year-old single woman who prefers plain beige sweaters and drives a 5-year-old sedan, and they assume I am barely scraping by. They assume I am the classic spinster sister who failed to launch, someone who needs pity, or, worse, someone whose time is worthless. I always let them assume. It is the most lethal advantage a woman can possess. What my family did not know, and what I had meticulously kept hidden from their greedy eyes, was that I was not a struggling mid-level bookkeeper. I am a senior forensic auditor specializing in corporate embezzlement, and the silent founder of a financial consulting firm currently valued at over $600 million. I hunt down missing money for federal agencies and Fortune 500 companies. I track offshore accounts, unmask fraudulent ledgers, and dismantle white-collar criminals for a living. But to Bradley and Vanessa, I was just poor Evie, the quiet sibling they could easily walk all over. I drove the 40-minute route to their affluent, gated neighborhood with the folder resting innocuously on the passenger seat. The community was an obnoxious display of new money. A private security guard who lazily waved me through the wrought iron gates, manicured lawns trimmed to the millimeter, and sprawling modern mansions designed to look like glass boxes. A high-stakes family dinner with the daughter-in-law's mother invited as an honored guest, while I was summoned like a subordinate employee. Inside, the house smelled like expensive rosemary, roasted garlic, and desperate financial overextension. The kitchen island was a slab of imported Italian marble large enough to land a helicopter on. Their baby Leo was asleep down the hall. He was 10 months old, a sweet boy with chubby cheeks, the baby monitor humming softly on the granite counter. "Red, okay, Evie," she said smoothly, not phrasing it as a question. She filled 3 crystal glasses to the brim before anyone even offered me a seat. Coral, sitting on a velvet barstool, nodded solemnly like it was an absolute truth written in scripture. I didn't correct her. Tuesdays were complete news to me. I hadn't babysat Leo on a Tuesday in 3 months. I had raised myself on frozen dinners and library books while our parents poured every cent of their resources into Bradley's private tutoring. I know the exact difference between a man who genuinely has money and a man who is terrified that you might realize he is broke. A $5,000 cash deposit due on Tuesday, from a couple who claimed they needed a lifesaver because they were struggling. We eventually sat down in the formal dining room, heavy cloth napkins, a centerpiece that probably cost more than my weekly groceries, and a butter-poached lobster roast that cost more than most people's car payments. Coral spent the first 20 minutes talking exclusively about her upcoming luxury cruise to the Mediterranean. Vanessa continuously refilled her own wine glass, watching Bradley from across the table like a lead actress waiting for her co-star to deliver his lines. The main course was cleared. Dessert came out, an artisanal tart that no one in this house had baked themselves. Bradley set down his silver fork, cleared his throat loudly, and squared his shoulders like a corporate salesman preparing to deliver a pitch to a hostile board. "I'm listening," I said, my voice flat. The dining room went dead still, even the baby monitor seemed to pause its white noise. "That's funny," I said, keeping my gaze locked on him. "You can't afford a $3,000 daycare on a combined income of $280,000 a year?" "It is not about the money," Vanessa said, her voice dropping into a patronizing, overly gentle register. "It's about family. It is about what is best for Leo. A precious baby shouldn't be raised by paid strangers in a facility." It is such a remarkably small word, yet they were forcing it to do an excruciating amount of heavy lifting. Duty, a word reserved for those they deemed beneath them in the family hierarchy. "Just crunching numbers. I keep the forensic books for federal investigations and trace billions in corporate fraud, bringing down corrupt executives who think they are untouchable." But to Bradley, I was just doing basic arithmetic with a calculator. "Before I give you an answer to that," I said, keeping my voice level, the decibel intentionally low, "let me make sure I clearly understand the underlying numbers. Let me tell you exactly who I am so the sheer audacity of their request makes perfect sense. I took my half, moved into a tiny unheated studio apartment, and invested every single cent into my education and certifications. I studied forensic accounting at night while working grueling bookkeeping jobs by day. I ate ramen noodles in the dark so I could afford to take my licensing exams. I built my career in the shadows. I never once asked Bradley for a dime, nor did I ever complain about the staggering weight of surviving on my own. I let those snide comments slide. I let a tremendous amount go where my brother was concerned. That was my fatal flaw, if you want the honest, brutal version of the story. It wasn't vanity, and it wasn't a pathetic fear of being labeled selfish by my toxic relatives. I simply never wanted to be one more person who made his chaotic life harder. I thought my absolute silence was a form of protective love. I was spectacularly wrong. Silence isn't protective to toxic people. Silence is an open invitation to exploit. I had the money liquid. I trusted them, because despite his immense flaws, he was still my only living blood relative. I had my personal attorney draft up a remarkably simple note for the loan, and I quietly signed my name beside theirs on the complex mortgage documents. I never in a million years imagined I would actually need to enforce any of it. Vanessa carefully set down her silver fork and folded her manicured hands, mirroring my own posture. She had always noticed that I do that when I am thinking. People who ask permission to be honest rarely have a shred of truth to offer. "He has love," I replied flatly. "He has love from his parents and he has love from me. Love and unpaid full-time labor are not the exact same thing." "Was your sister paid for her time?" I asked, looking directly into Coral's eyes. I nodded slowly. "I noted that exactly. I am an auditor. I note everything. I just don't understand." Vanessa whispered, her eyes shining with engineered tears. "I truly don't understand how a boring desk job could possibly matter more to you than your own flesh and blood nephew. What are people going to think?" There it was, the elaborate psychological frame they had spent weeks meticulously building. The selfish, cold, calculating old maid, the greedy, heartless sister choosing lifeless spreadsheets over a child's warm, chubby arms. I felt the immense gravitational pull of it. I want to be profoundly honest about that right now. The primal terror of being painted as the ultimate villain in your own family's narrative is a terrifying, suffocating thing. I felt every single ounce of that toxic shame trying to crush my chest. "Tell me something, Vanessa," I said quietly, the silence in the room amplifying my voice. "If this isn't about the money, why did you open the conversation by explicitly talking about money?" Here is the exact piece of the puzzle they didn't know I had already started putting together before I ever walked through their front door. The cover letter from the bank's underwriting department had demanded my notarized signature as the primary guarantor within exactly 60 days. There was a specific deadline date circled in the bank's own red ink. Their debt-to-income ratio wasn't just bad, it was catastrophically worse than it had been when I bailed them out 3 years ago. 2 brand-new luxury car leases, a home equity line of credit drawn down so close to its absolute limit that the bank was practically hyperventilating. They were carrying a luxury mortgage they could only barely afford if nothing ever went wrong. And in life, something always goes wrong, and something catastrophic was about to happen to them. Without my legal signature as the guarantor, there was no refinance. The bank would instantly reject them, so this lavish dinner wasn't really about Leo's daycare. Daycare was just the soft opening pitch. The real demand, the agonizing asks underneath the ask, was infinitely bigger. and it required my complete subjugation in two separate ways at once. They demanded my time and they demanded my name. When exactly is that Montessori deposit due again? I asked, casually nodding toward the kitchen refrigerator. The $5,000 one you desperately tried to hide. And the bank's refinance papers, I said, my voice dropping lower. Those have a very specific expiration date too, don't they? You've already seen the refinance documents, Vanessa stated, her voice suddenly devoid of any fake warmth. Coral looked frantically from her scowling daughter to my calm face, suddenly painfully aware that she had smugly walked into a high-stakes conversation with a floor she couldn't actually see. One beautiful solution for them, so I did what I always do when I am building an ironclad cake. I bought myself time. You know how I operate, I added softly. I never ever sign a document that I haven't thoroughly read. Vanessa dramatically lifted her crystal wine glass. To family, she declared, I told them I would look at the paperwork. I didn't tell them I had already started tearing it apart. And I certainly didn't tell them what I expected to find buried inside those numbers. I put on my reading glasses, opened my secure laptop, and I started building a spreadsheet. For most people, that sounds like work. For me, that is precisely what unwinding looks like. I had vastly more of their financial information than they realized, because a comprehensive guarantor's packet includes updated pay stubs, bank statements, tax returns, the entire work. $16,000 a month, that was real, staggering money. It was significantly more money than I ever saw while I was clawing my way out of poverty. The luxury, 1,002 premium SUVs leases, $5,400 the exclusive country club membership, $800 a staggering payment on the maxed out line of credit. Fine dining, luxury travel, and a literal closet's worth of premium subscription boxes. I sat back in my chair and simply stared at the glowing screen. They had a toxic, inflated lifestyle problem that they refused to touch. If they simply dropped one of the luxury vehicle leases, temporarily paused the absurd country club membership, and stopped eating out 5 nights a week, the supposedly unaffordable premium daycare fit into their budget with thousands of dollars of room to spare. I made a sharp note in the margin of my notepad and turned to a fresh spreadsheet tab. Outside my window, the city streets were dark and silent. Inside my apartment, the numbers were finally starting to speak to me. The brutal story they were telling wasn't the fake, tear-jerking one I had been served alongside the lobster at dinner. And I was only on the very first page. The psychological pressure didn't even wait a full 24 hours. It started the very next morning. Vanessa texted me right at 7 a.m. It was a carefully staged photo of baby Leo sitting in his expensive high chair, oatmeal smeared adorably across his cheeks, captioned, "He desperately needs his Auntie Evie. Not a stranger, please think about him." By noon another text arrived, really stressed about the bank deadline on Friday. "Evie, we are counting on you." I didn't answer either of them. I have learned over the years that absolute silence is a complete sentence. Then my cousin Diane called me in a complete panic. "Evie, honey, is everything okay with you and Bradley?" I just saw Vanessa's terrifying post online. "What post?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. Vanessa had written a massive, tear-jerking paragraph on her public social media page. She used no names, but she provided just enough toxic breadcrumbs for everyone in our circle to know exactly who she was targeting. Some people choose money and their boring desk jobs over their own family. It is heartbreaking when it's the very people who should love your child the most. So grateful for the ones who actually show up and do their duty. The comment section was an absolute echo chamber of crying emojis and unhinged sympathy for Vanessa, while I sat quietly in my apartment, successfully painted as the wicked, heartless spinster who selfishly loved her spreadsheets vastly more than her own innocent nephew. It is a clever weapon, public shame. You don't actually have to prove a single thing. You just dramatically set the stage, shed a few tears, and let the audience fill in the blanks of the villain. I didn't call her and I didn't defend myself. I just went back to the paperwork. I went back through the bank package line by grueling line, slowly rereading every single mundane entry because a professional itch was burning at the back of my brain and it simply wouldn't stop. I had been looking at the numbers, the bloated mortgage, the luxury vehicle leases, the suffocating credit lines. Now I forced myself to look at the small ones, the quiet, recurring ones. Money always tells the absolute, unvarnished truth in its daily habits. There, buried deep on 3 consecutive months of bank statements, was the exact same transaction. A quiet transfer out of their checking account on the first of every single month. Exactly under $500. There was no clear label, just a bank code, initials, and a cryptic reference number. $1,500 a month, that is $18,000 a year. bleeding out of their account like perfect clockwork. I flipped to the spending tab in my open folder and wrote the number down in bold black ink. I circled it twice. Who on earth receives exactly $1,500 every single month from a supposedly broke couple who claims they cannot afford daycare? It wasn't a hidden mortgage. It wasn't a secret car payment. Those debts were already fully accounted for. This was something else. It was something steady, something deliberate, something they had quietly built into the core of their budget and accepted without question. I checked the dates on the previous statements. The bizarre transfers had started exactly 10 months ago. 10 months, the exact same age as baby Leo. A cold little arithmetic puzzle began solving itself at the back of my mind. The exact kind of dark math you desperately do not want to finish. $500 a month, beginning the exact month the baby was born, paid secretly to someone, while they sat at that lavish dining table, looked me dead in the eyes and told me there was no money for childcare. I didn't have the exact name of the recipient yet. The bank statement only provided initials and a routing code. But I knew the shape of it now, and the shape was ugly. I drew a thick black box around the entry and labeled it with a single aggressive question mark. Then I turned the final page looking for the ultimate answer, and I found something infinitely worse than a secret payment. It was buried 3 pages deep in the refinance package, carefully tucked behind the official property appraisal. It was a supplemental worksheet, the exact kind of desperate document a financially drowning borrower submits to the bank to make a wildly shaky loan look significantly safer. It was future income penciled in to drastically strengthen the application. The header read, "Projected rental income supporting." There was exactly one property listed on it. One specific address, mine, my home, the beautiful quiet 2-bedroom apartment in the city that I had purchased in cash and owned. The sanctuary I had built from nothing. It was casually written into their own bank income projection as a future rental property that they somehow controlled. There was a projected monthly rent number, a projected annual revenue figure, and a devastating, handwritten note in the margin: available Q2. Pending family relocation. That was me. I read the terrifying page twice. The address was undeniably mine, the sickening plan was not. I set the piece of paper down very carefully, the exact way you set down a live explosive device. My hands were steady, I made sure of that. I have found over the years that steady hands help you think with lethal clarity. This was the terrifying master plan they couldn't possibly say out loud at dinner. The dinner wasn't just, "Come help us with the baby because you're lonely." The demand wasn't even just, "Quit your job and move into the basement." The master plan was for me to legally sign my home over to them, surrender the life I had meticulously built, move into their basement as an unpaid live-in servant, and allow my equity, my prestigious address, and my entire standing in the world to be folded into a bank worksheet to illegally prop up their collapsing loan. They hadn't actually asked me to do any of this. They had already drafted it. They had already penciled my entire existence into their financial future like a disposable line item, all while serving me lobster and having the sheer audacity to call it love. I looked at the leather folder. I looked at the $1,500 entry I had just circled on the page before it. 2 unimaginably ugly facts now sitting side by side on my table. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't call Bradley and demand an explanation. I poured myself a glass of ice water, sat back down at my laptop, and I started a 3rd tab on the spreadsheet. If they desperately wanted to talk about my future, I would bring the documents that showed exactly what they had secretly decided about mine. I closed the thick leather cover over my 3 spreadsheet tabs and the one name I was finally ready to confirm. Finding the exact identity attached to that $1,500 recurring payment took me exactly 1 phone call and 1 professional favor. A close colleague from my early days in forensic banking still reads complex transaction codes with the same lethal precision that I do. I gave her the cryptic reference number, nothing illegal, nothing private, just the basic routing pattern, and simply asked her what kind of receiving account it pointed to. "It's a personal checking account," my colleague said over the phone, her fingers rapidly clicking on a keyboard in the background. "Same major bank as the sender. It's a recurring automated transfer, looks exactly like a standing family financial arrangement. The internal memo field literally says childcare mom. Childcare mom, but I am Bradley's sister. Our mother has been dead for 14 years, and no one had ever sent me a single dime, so who exactly was mom?" I already knew I had known since the exact moment Coral sat at that lavish dining table, sipping expensive wine, and loudly declared that grandmothers should step up and work for free. She had said it with the blinding, arrogant confidence of a woman who has never once in her entire life done anything for free. $1,500 a month was going directly to Coral, Vanessa's mother, for watching baby Leo on the days she bothered to do it. I sat in the absolute silence of my apartment for a very long minute. They were already actively paying for premium childcare. $18,000 a year reliably paid every single month since the baby came home from the hospital, directly to the other side of the family. And then they had the unmitigated audacity to invite me to dinner, look me directly in the eyes, tell me there was no money, and demand I quit my life to do the exact same job for nothing. All while secretly planning to rent out my home to fund their failing lifestyle. I pulled up the premium daycare quote I had saved earlier. The elite Montessori facility charged exactly $1,050 a month for licensed infant care. They were currently paying Coral $1,500. The staggering difference between we are going bankrupt and cannot afford daycare, and the reality that we already pay for premium childcare was exactly $150 a month. $150 stood between their massive tear-jerking lie and the brutal truth. And then the entire sinister master plan clicked into place in my head. If I capitulated and worked for them for free, they could immediately stop paying Coral and pocket the $1,500 for themselves to keep paying off Vanessa's SUV. If I relocated into their basement, they could illegally rent my apartment out and float the refinance package that was currently destroying them. Leo's daycare was never the actual prize. I was the prize: my time, my fully paid off home, my pristine name on a bank document, and my total financial subjugation. All of it. I wrote Coral's name on tab 3 of my spreadsheet, directly beside the financial figure. I wrote it in bold black ink this time, no more pencil. Then I attached the rental worksheet directly behind it. My stolen home, her secret salary, and their lie, all printed on one page. The Oxblood folder was now full. Sunday was exactly 2 days away. I almost felt sorry for the absolute financial carnage that was coming for them. Almost. I desperately want you to picture the life they were demanding I walk away from. Because they never did. To Bradley and Vanessa I was just winding down, a pathetic, lonely spinster with a basic calculator and far too much free time. They had no idea what my days actually looked like. That very same week I had just finished orchestrating a financial takedown that I had been building for 8 agonizing months. One of my firm's largest clients, a massive family-owned industrial distributor with over 400 employees and 80 years in business, had been exactly 3 months away from permanently closing their doors. They were bleeding cash, drowning in horrific inventory decisions, and the CEO was fully prepared to lay off hundreds of innocent people right before Christmas. I had gone in with my team, ripped open the corporate books, and found the financial leaks. I renegotiated their corporate terms, ruthlessly restructured their toxic debt, surgically cut the corruption that was killing them, and protected the core assets that were actually working. That Friday afternoon, the desperate CEO had called me in genuine tears. Good, overwhelming tears. They had successfully made payroll, they were keeping the doors open. 400 families would have a steady paycheck in January. A young, brilliant financial analyst at the firm, sharp as a tack, caught me on my way out of the building. "Ms. Vance," he said, staring at me in sheer awe, "you are the absolute most lethal person with numbers I have ever seen. It's terrifying, and it's not even close." I had driven home that night thinking about Bradley's insulting words. Crunching numbers, winding down, the basement, the quiet, unassuming woman they wanted to retire into their basement to wash their baby's bottles had just saved 400 jobs from her kitchen table with a single encrypted laptop. The skill set they casually dismissed as a pathetic hobby was the exact same lethal skill set that was about to surgically dismantle their entire existence. People constantly underestimate quiet, unassuming women who silently count things. They fatally mistake our absolute calm for weakness, and they mistake our infinite patience for permission. I have always let them. It is the absolute cheapest tactical advantage there is. But there is a massive, violent difference between quietly letting someone underestimate your career and actively letting them try to steal your home. What Bradley and Vanessa did not know, what no one in the family knew, was that 6 months ago, when my consulting firm acquired a portfolio of distressed residential debt, their specific luxury mortgage was buried deep inside it. I didn't just hold the keys to the refinance package. Through a web of corporate shell companies, I literally owned the suffocating debt on the very house they were sitting in. I packed my laptop, my Oxblood folder, and my reading glass. Sunday was tomorrow. I wasn't winding down. I was just getting to the part of the spreadsheet that actually mattered. Saturday night I meticulously assembled it like a lethal closing binder for a corporate trial. I am methodical, the organization comes. I printed the 3 tabs on crisp, heavy paper and laid them out on the wooden table in perfect order. Tab 1, their cash flow, absolute, irrefutable proof they could easily afford daycare with thousands of dollars of room to spare. $16,000 a month in pure cash, funding a toxic lifestyle they refused to trim. Tab 2, the cost of help, the brutal reality, $250,000 in my lost income, lost benefits, and stolen labor. The real price of the minor favor they had the audacity to call love. Tab 3, the truth, the secret, $500 a month to Coral, the rental worksheet with my specific home address on it. The handwritten note in the margin, pending family relocation. My entire future penciled into their toxic loan. I clipped them together in perfect order and slid them smoothly into the oxblood folder. I slowly ran my thumb along the soft worn corner of the leather. The exact way a soldier checks the sharp edge of a knife without fully meaning to. I wasn't going to raise my voice on Sunday, I wasn't going to cry, and I wasn't going to argue. Arguing is a pathetic tactic reserved for people who do not have the documents. I was simply going to itemize. I sat still in the dark thinking intensely about baby Leo. He was asleep down their hallway, 10 months old and innocent of all the financial carnage being orchestrated in his name. I wasn't doing this to him, I would never ever do this to him. I was doing this for the future version of him. The young man who would eventually grow up watching exactly how his toxic family treated the people who supposedly loved them. A boy should learn early that genuine love is not something you can casually invoice your aunt for. I set the heavy oxblood folder by the front door, I laid my reading glasses on top of it. I went to bed and slept significantly better than I had in an entire week. But before the ultimate confrontation on Sunday, the universe provided one final pathetic moment of absolute clarity. Late Saturday night, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Bradley. He was calling me alone, which I could instantly tell because there was no frantic whispering from Vanessa coaching him in the background. "Hey, Evie." His voice was small, the exact pathetic voice he used to use when we were teenagers and he had spectacularly wrecked our parents' car and needed me to lie for him. "Hi, Bradley," I answered softly. He was quiet for a very long while, the heavy silence hanging between us. Then it came out in a massive rushed confession. "Evie, I am drowning, we are so far underwater. I literally cannot see the surface anymore, the house, the leased cars, the Montessori deposit. Every single month is an absolute knife fight just to keep the lights on." He exhaled a ragged breath. "Vanessa handles all our accounts, I only see the panic, not the actual line items. Maybe I just never wanted to look." For exactly one breath, a tiny foolish part of me forgot the worksheet. I forgot the $1,500 secret payments to Coral, and I forgot the horrific plan to steal my apartment. For one fleeting second he was just my terrified older brother, scared in the dark, and everything in my core wanted to jump in and fix it for him. "Then we fix it honestly, Bradley," I said gently. "You sell the house that is too big for you. You drop at least one of the luxury car leases, you sit down with me and I will help you make a real, sustainable financial plan. I will sit with you all weekend and fix the books." "No," he said quickly, the panic returning to his voice. "No, we cannot do that. That would look like complete failure. People at the country club would know. The partners at my firm would know." He exhaled heavily, his tone shifting to something far darker and manipulative. "There is an infinitely easier way, Evie. You move in, you watch Leo, the refinance goes through smoothly, and we get to keep everything. You have worked your whole life alone, Evie, now it's your turn to just be there for us. To be part of a real family." There it was, the absolute final nail in the coffin, the brother I had loved, handing me the bill for his own pathetic pride. "It's your turn to just be there," as if the grueling nights I had worked to feed myself while he partied were a debt I somehow owed back to him in my prime. As if my entire existence was nothing more than a convenient layaway plan he was finally collecting on. "Let's all have dinner on Sunday," he said, sensing my silence and assuming it was compliance. "We will sort it all out, everyone together Sunday," I agreed, my voice dropping to a glacial chill. Everyone together. I hung up the phone and stared blankly at the ceiling. He desperately wanted everyone together, so did I, just didn't think we wanted it for the exact same reason. When Sunday evening finally arrived, I drove the 20 minutes back through the absurd iron gates, past the trimmed lawns, and arrived at a lavish dinner they arrogantly thought they had already won. They had meticulously set the table. I had brought the math. Sunday 6 p.m. The absurd seasonal wreath was still hanging on the double doors. They had gone all out for this final push. Tall, expensive candles were lit this time, A standing rib roast was steaming in the center of the table. Vanessa was wearing expensive pearls, playing the role of the perfect wealthy hostess. The entire toxic cast was assembled, Bradley, Vanessa and Coral sitting proudly at the head of the table. "Evie, you look wonderful," Vanessa lied smoothly, immediately reaching for the expensive bottle of wine. She poured my glass first, then filled her own glass too high. "We are so glad you are here, so glad we can finally settle all of this permanently as a family." Settle. She used the word as if it were an absolute certainty, which, in their delusional minds, it was. Coral patted the velvet chair directly beside her. "Come sit down, dear, we were just saying how lucky little Leo is to have an aunt who will be there for him every single day. Most single women your age would give anything to be surrounded by family." Bradley hovered nervously near the kitchen island, frantically refilling water glasses that did not need refilling. His fake smile was a size too small for his face. He refused to look at me. A weak man can never look directly at the sister he is actively trying to sell out. I sat down gracefully and set the heavy leather folder directly on the table, right next to my pristine white plate. It was closed, thick and quiet. Vanessa's eyes instantly flicked down to the folder, then quickly darted away. "Oh, you can totally put that boring work stuff in the other room if you like, Evie," she said with a tight, nervous laugh. "No work tonight, just family. I'll keep it close," I replied, my voice neutral. "You never know when you might need to check a specific number." We sat in tense silence while the heavy roast steamed. The baby monitor hummed down the long hallway, and I let them confidently think they were running the evening. For now, they didn't even make it to the dessert course this time. Vanessa was far too greedy and impatient, so she said, dramatically setting down her silver fork and leaning forward. "You have had your full week. You have reviewed all the paperwork just like you wanted." She flashed a thin, predatory smile. "We desperately need an answer tonight, Evie. The refinance is officially due, and the daycare waitlist won't hold our spot any longer." "We just need to know you are fully with us, Evie," Bradley added weakly, staring at his plate. "That you are truly family." I folded my hands over the folder. "I have reviewed everything," I said very carefully, letting the words hang in the air. Something in my calm tone made Vanessa sit up in her chair. She had clearly expected pathetic tears, immense guilt, or a profusely grateful spinster finally accepting her place in the basement. She got a level voice and a closed black folder, and it deeply unsettled her. So she immediately reached for her best psychological weapon. The exact one that had kept me quiet, endlessly accommodating, and terrified of being the bad guy for my entire life. "You know, Evie," she said, her voice loud enough for the entire room to hear, "a real aunt wouldn't selfishly put a boring spreadsheet over her own flesh and blood nephew. It's truly pathetic." The entire dining room went dead quiet. Coral nodded her head in smug, satisfied agreement. Bradley physically winced at the sheer cruelty of the statement but cowardly said nothing. They genuinely thought she had successfully landed the ultimate killing psychological blow. A real aunt wouldn't selfishly put a boring spreadsheet over her own flesh and blood nephew. I let that vile sentence sit right there in the flickering candlelight. I let it be exactly as ugly, manipulative, and deeply toxic as it was. Then I reached up, unhurried, and smoothly put on my reading glasses. The entire table watched me do it. To their arrogant eyes, it simply looked like stalling. An insecure spinster hopelessly fussing, desperately buying time, and finally working up the pathetic nerve to fold and give them everything they wanted. Vanessa even smirked, certain she had secured the victory. She did not know what the glasses meant. In my 12 grueling years of destroying corporate criminals, no one had ever wanted to remain sitting across a table from me once I finally put them on. "You are right, Vanessa," I said, settling the glasses on the bridge of my nose. "Let's not talk about feelings. Feelings are messy." My hand moved smoothly to the heavy leather folder. "Let's talk about facts," I said. I pulled the oxblood folder directly to the absolute center of the table, placing it right between the expensive steaming roast and the burning candles where everyone could see it. The worn leather cover sat on Vanessa's pristine white linen like a stone dropped into a quiet fountain. "You have all been patient with me this week," I began, my voice carrying the lethal authority of a judge reading a sentence. "The pathetic winding down aunt, so let me immediately return the courtesy. I did exactly what you asked me to do. I reviewed everything, Evie, please." Bradley started, sensing the shift in the room's atmospheric pressure. "You demanded an answer tonight," I cut him off, my voice cracking through the room like a whip. "You will get a complete, exhaustive one with citations and sources." Coral let out a small, nervous laugh. "Evie, really, there is no need to make such a production out of this. We are simply asking for is every need, I interrupted, staring directly into Coral's eyes until she physically looked away. You asked me to make the single biggest financial decision of my entire life. I do not make financial decisions based on a manufactured guilt trip. And neither should you. I rested my hand flat on the top of the closed folder. I could physically feel every single pair of eyes in the room land on it. Vanessa's smug, triumphant smile had finally died. Before I decide whether I can supposedly afford to move into your basement, I said softly, let's take a hard look at what you can actually afford together as a family. I unclipped the heavy metal clasp of the cover. Tab 1, I announced, and I threw the folder open. What slid into the soft candlelight wasn't a pathetic feeling or a manufactured guilt trip or a lonely spinster's fear of abandonment. It was the absolute irrefutable truth printed in clean rows with their very own names printed at the absolute top of every single column. Tab 1 is your complete cash flow, I stated plainly. These are your exact numbers, not mine. I turned the first crisp page so it directly faced them, and I read it out loud with absolute lethal precision. $280,000 a year in gross income. After taxes and pathetic retirement contributions, roughly $16,000 a month of pure liquid cash lands directly into your joint checking accounts. I tapped my finger on the first row, $6,000, 2 brand new premium SUV leases, $1,400. The exclusive country club membership, $800. Fine dining, luxury vacations, and absurd subscription boxes, another $2,000 a month. Vanessa reached across the table to snatch the page from me. I didn't even try to stop her. I had brought 3 backup copies, premium infant daycare in this specific zip code. I went on, raising my voice just enough to cut through her heavy breathing. Runs exactly $3,000 a month. That is $36,000 a year. I looked up over the rim of my reading glasses, locking eyes with my sweating brother. You can comfortably afford that easily, Bradley. Drop exactly one of the luxury SUV leases and temporarily pause the ridiculous country club membership, and the unaffordable daycare is covered with thousands of dollars of room to spare. You do not understand our complex expenses, Evie. Bradley practically shouted, the red color rising in his neck and face. I understand them perfectly, I replied, my voice unshaken. I have all of your bank statements. I am the primator on your failing loan. Remember, I let a massive heavy pause do its brutal work. You do not have a daycare problem, Bradley, I said softly. You have a luxury car problem. Vanessa's face went blotchy, her applied makeup unable to hide the sheer, furious red spreading across her cheeks. So what? We like nice things. Is that suddenly a federal crime now? Not at all, I replied calmly. You can like whatever you can realistically pay for. But do not hide a $5,000 non-refundable Montessori deposit in a kitchen drawer. Feed me lobster, look me dead in the eyes and tell me there is no money. I leaned slightly forward. There is plenty of money. You simply decided that I should be the pathetic idiot who spends mine. Bradley's jaw worked violently, but no words came out. Vanessa gripped her crystal wine glass so I thought the stem was going to shatter in her hand. Her knuckles were white. That is absm, I said calmly, turning over to the next crisp page. It only gets significantly clearer from here. I smoothly slid tab 1 into the absolute center of the table, face up directly next to the steaming roast where anyone with functioning eyes could read it. The very first lie was officially bleeding out on the table, and it wasn't getting back up. Tab 2, I announced. Tab 2 is the exact itemized cost of what you so casually called a family favor. I read the spreadsheet the exact same way I would read an audit to a terrified CEO. No drama. Just cold, hard numbers. If I quit my lucrative career right now and move into your basement to do this, here is exactly what it costs me. Lost salary over the next 2 years, $240,000. Lost federal health insurance, lost matching retirement growth that I will never be able to make back. Nobody is actually asking you to. Vanessa started. You are, I cut her off sharply. That is exactly what you are demanding. I physically turned the page toward her. And then there is the value of the labor itself. Full-time premium infant care at the current market rate in this county is roughly $45,000 a year. I priced it exactly. That is what you would have to pay a licensed nanny. That is what my time is actually worth on the open market. I pressed my index finger onto the bolded total at the absolute bottom of the page. Add it all up, you are asking me to hand you roughly $300,000. I looked directly at my terrified older brother. And you expect me to humbly say thank you for the incredible chance to do it. Vanessa's voice climbed an entire octave, morphing into a hysterical shriek. This is insane, you are putting a cheap price tag on your own innocent nephew. I replied, refusing to raise my voice. I actively lowered it, making the cold fury even sharper. You did that exactly 10 months ago. I am merely reading you the itemized receipt. Something shifted in the atmosphere of the room the exact second she got screamingly loud and I got quiet. Coral instantly felt the power shift and stopped her smug nodding. Bradley felt it and looked at me for the very first time with genuine, unadulterated fear. A genuine favor is something you freely choose to give, I said, the absolute silence returning to the room. What you have described tonight is something you take. There is a specific word for taking hundreds of thousands of dollars under the cheap cover of family love. It isn't duty, it's theft. You are twisting everything. Vanessa hissed, her manicured hands shaking violently. I haven't said one single untrue thing, I replied calmly. And I haven't even successfully reached tab 3. I turned the final page. The entire dining room had gone so still that I could actually hear the wax dripping from the tall candles. Tab 3, I announced, my voice dropping to a near whisper, is the specific tab you really, desperately do not want me to read out loud. I laid the first page of tab 3 directly in the center where the candlelight caught the bold ink. Tab 3 has exactly 2 parts, I said. I will take them in perfect chronological order. I pointed directly at the circled numbers. Every single month for the last 10 months, exactly $1,500 has quietly left your checking account. The bank memo field literally reads childcare mom. That is $18,000 a year. I looked directly across the table at Coral, who had suddenly turned the exact color of dirty chalk. But I have never ever received a single red cent from either of you, so I had to make a few phone calls to ask. Who exactly is mom? Coral's face drained of all color, her diamond necklace suddenly looking heavy on her trembling neck. You have been secretly paying Coral, I stated plainly, looking Bradley dead in the eye, to occasionally watch Leo this entire time, while inviting me to this lavish dinner and telling me there was no money for childcare. That is private, Coral sputtered, clutching her expensive cloth napkin. That is a deeply personal family arrangement. It is a paid financial arrangement, I corrected her instantly. $1,500 a month. Licensed premium daycare in this exact area is exactly $1,650. The mathematical difference between your tear-jerking lie and the absolute truth, Bradley, is exactly $150. Bradley slowly turned his head to stare at his wife. He looked like a man who had just been struck by a freight train. You are secretly paying your mother. His voice cracking into a million pieces. You looked me in the eye and said she did it out of love. For free. His voice rose into a desperate shout. I never even see the bank statements. Vanessa, we fought for 3 days about that Montessori deposit. And you were hiding this payment to your mother. Don't, Vanessa snapped, pointing a shaking manicured finger at his face. Don't you dare try to make this entire disaster about me. My mother actually deserves compensation for her hard work. I sat back in my chair and let them turn on each other for exactly 5 satisfying seconds. I watched the entire toxic marriage start to crumble right there over the butter-poached lobster. Then I picked up the second part of tab 3 and I laid it flat on the table with a loud, aggressive smack. And this, I said, my voice shattering their screaming match, is the specific part that is actually a federal crime. I physically turned the bank's rental worksheet so it faced the entire table. This is the future income projection worksheet you submitted to the bank, along with your fraudulent refinance package, I stated, reading the header. Projected rental income supporting properties. I let the absolute silence hang for 3 terrifying seconds. There is exactly one single property listed on this official bank document, I said. I paused. My paid-off apartment, the home I bought with my own cash, written into your paperwork as your own future rental property. Vanessa froze. She stopped breathing. The handwritten note in the margin, I continued, pointing directly at the ink, reads exactly available Q2. Pending family relocation. I added nothing else. I simply sat there and let them read their own toxic ink. The family relocation, I said quietly, is me. You penciled my own home into your bank loan before you ever even invited me to this dinner. The entire dining table broke. Bradley put his face in his hands and let out a pathetic, broken sob. Evie, I swear to God it wasn't. We were eventually going to talk to you about it. You were going to inform me. I corrected him sharply. There is a difference. Vanessa shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the expensive hardwood floor. We did this for our family, she screamed, dropping the polite, wounded hostess act. We did this for your own innocent nephew. And you are sitting here humiliating us with your pathetic, boring paperwork. I looked slowly up at her, calm, absolute still water. You can easily afford daycare, Vanessa, I said, my voice steady. You just can't afford the actual truth. Vanessa's arm came down, the expensive crystal wineglass cracked against the solid mahogany table. Deep red wine spread across the pristine white linen tablecloth like something spilled and final. No one moved a single muscle. Vanessa was breathing hard, actual tears streaming down her contoured face. They weren't sorry tears, they were furious, humiliating tears, the specific tears of a deeply toxic person who has just been caught, not a person who is actually ashamed. You have ruined everything, she hissed, staring at the spreading red stain. No, I replied, unshaken, I just read it out loud. There is a massive fundamental difference. Coral frantically clutched her ruined napkin and stared at the red wine bleeding rapidly into the expensive cloth. Bradley refused to lift his pathetic head from his hands. And down the long, luxurious hallway, little Leo slept peacefully through every single word of it, innocent of the horrific math being done in his name. I sat still and let the heavy, suffocating silence hold the entire room hostage for a full 60 seconds. I wanted them to feel every single agonizing second of their absolute total defeat. Then, unhurried, I reached up, slowly took off my reading glasses and meticulously folded them on the table directly beside the ruined, wine-soaked linen. Here is my complete final answer, I announced, my voice carrying absolute terrifying finality. I looked at each of them in turn, my pathetic broken older brother, his furious calculating wife, and her utterly humiliated, speechless mother. I will not give up my home, I will not move into your dark basement to be your unpaid servant. And I will not quit the massively successful financial firm that I have spent the last 12 years secretly building. I paused, letting the final piece of the puzzle click into place. A firm, by the way, that is currently valued at over $600 million. I own it, and through one of my many corporate shell companies, I also own the distressed debt on this exact luxury house you are currently sitting in. Bradley's head snapped up, his red eyes wide with absolute, unadulterated shock. 600 what, Evie, what are you talking about? I ignored his pathetic question. I folded my hands together, and I absolutely under no circumstances will guarantee your fraudulent bank refinance. Bradley panicked, all the remaining color draining from his face for a second time. Evie, wait, please. Without your signature on the refinance, the credit line resets next month. The bank will foreclose, we could lose the house. Then you will successfully sell the house that is too big for you, I said gently, offering no sympathy. And you will learn to humbly live in a much smaller one that you can actually afford. Millions of normal people do it every single day. I did it for 12 agonizing years in a freezing studio apartment while you laughed at me and called me a pathetic spinster. I ignored his pathetic sobbing and turned my calm gaze directly to Vanessa. And the $90,000, I went on, my voice cold. The cash down payment I personally lent you 3 years ago. I have the legally binding note. We will instantly convert it to an aggressive written repayment schedule starting exactly next month. My corporate legal team will send the official documents by messenger. Vanessa let out a horrific, wet, bitter laugh. So this is it. This is your pathetic, grand revenge. You are using your secret money to ruin us. No, I replied, standing up so gracefully, smoothing out my plain beige sweater. You used my money and my unconditional love to tell toxic lies. I am simply using my boring spreadsheets to tell the absolute truth. It is the exact only weapon I ever brought to the table. I picked up the heavy oxblood folder and tucked it under my arm. You loudly said that a real aunt wouldn't selfishly put a boring spreadsheet over her own innocent nephew. I said, staring Vanessa down until she was forced to avert her eyes. A real loving aunt teaches him the absolute truth. She refuses to let him grow up in a toxic house, billing the exact people who supposedly love him. I tucked my reading glasses smoothly into my pocket. I will always be Leo's loving aunt, I stated firmly. But I will never ever be your disposable line item. I turned my back on the entire toxic table. I confidently walked out of the dining room, walked directly past the 2 obscenely leased luxury chauvises in the wide driveway, past the lazy security guard at the wrought iron gates, and drove directly back into my own peaceful, fully paid-for, magnificent life. I did not look back. I didn't need to. The explosion was already unfolding behind me. Exactly as I had predicted, the fraudulent bank refinance died a very quick, violent death the following Monday morning. Without my pristine signature and my financial backing, the underwriter wouldn't even carry the paperwork across the desk. The home equity credit line reset to its higher fully amortized payment, and the toxic math they had dodged for years finally caught them. By the early spring, the glass-box mansion was officially put on the market. In a pathetic twist of pure irony, it was listed by the very same aggressive realtor Vanessa had secretly called to illegally list my apartment. They were forced to buy something significantly smaller, exactly 2 towns over. It was a basic 3-bedroom house, no wrought iron gates, and a tiny driveway with exactly enough room for only one single car, because the bank repossessed one of the luxury leases. The secret $1,500 a month to Coral stopped immediately. It is funny how the deeply personal family arrangement ended the exact moment it cost more in public shame than it secretly saved in cold cash. Coral refuses to call me. I find I do not mind the incredible silence. The infinitely harder truth came out behind their closed doors. For the first time in his entire life, Bradley was forced to sit down at a cheap kitchen table and actually look at the accounts his toxic wife had always handled alone. The secret standing payments to her mother, the fraudulent realtor she had called, the cash out they had been desperately counting on to outrun the reset. He hadn't actually looked at the books in years. He was forced to look now. I know they are in expensive couples counseling. I genuinely hope it actually helps them. I won't be paying a single cent for it. Bradley came by my secure luxury office building alone in late April. He stood awkwardly in my lobby for a very long time before he finally approached the receptionist. He didn't fully apologize. He is definitely not there yet, and I have stopped waiting for toxic men to arrive on schedule. But he admitted one true thing: I was so terrified of looking like an absolute failure to my friends. He confessed that I almost did something unforgivable to my own sister. I told him that pathetic fear explains a great deal, but it excuses very little. I still see little Leo now exclusively on Saturday afternoons. It is my choice, and it is my absolute greatest joy. We don't do anything lavish or expensive. We sit on the floor and read cheap library books, the good kind with the worn-out spines and the colorful pictures. I happily babysit my nephew because I adore him, not because I have been invoiced for him by a toxic family trying to steal my life. I heard through the active family grapevine that the red wine stain never came out of Vanessa's expensive, imported white linen. A mutual cousin told me that they desperately tried every expensive dry cleaner in the city, but they eventually had to throw the tablecloth away. I find that fitting. There are some deep toxic that you simply cannot scrub out, no matter how much expensive soap you use. Eventually, you just have to stop setting the beautiful table directly over them. Here is exactly what I know now after 34 grueling years of absolute silence and one expensive, explosive Sunday dinner. Absolute genuine love is a freely given gift. It is not a disposable budget line item. Your hard work, your success, and your deeply peaceful silence do not owe your toxic family a single cent of your money or a single second of your precious time. The absolute moment someone tries to put a cheap, pathetic price tag on your unconditional love, that is the exact moment they stop being your real family, and they become a toxic liability that you must surgically cut from your books. That is my absolute truth. That is my complete story. They arrogantly set the lavish table, confident that they had successfully trapped the pathetic, lonely spinster. I quietly brought the math, and I bought the bank that owned the table. If you are listening to this right now, and you have ever been treated like a disposable line item by the exact people who supposedly love you, let my story be your absolute ironclad permission to stop trying to explain yourself to committed liars. Let this be your absolute permission to compile your own receipts, close the heavy oxblood folder, confidently stand up from a talk table and walk away into your own beautiful, fully paid for life. And never ever look back. Thank you so much for listening to Alpha Mom Stories. If my incredible journey gave you the absolute courage to finally draw a boundary with the toxic people in your own life, please hit that like button right now. Share this specific video with any woman who desperately needs a reminder of her own incredible power. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories of absolute, cold justice. Leave a comment down below and tell me, if your toxic family demanded you give up your home, would you bring the black folder, or would you simply cut them off in absolute silence? I read every single comment, and I will see you all next time. Stay strong, stay brilliant, and always count your own beautiful numbers.